The chill of December didn't stand a chance against the warmth buzzing through me as I waited at the airport on December 15, 2023. For years felt like a lifetime, but today, she was coming home. My girlfriend, the one who jetted off to study abroad, leaving a gaping hole in my daily life, was finally returning, even if just for the holidays. I couldn't help but bounce on my heels, a goofy grin plastered on my face, ignoring the curious glances from other bystanders. When she finally emerged, slightly tipsy from the flight's indulgences, our eyes locked, and it was like we were the only two people in the world. The drive home was surreal. She was here, in my car, her laughter filling the space between us, cutting through the years of distance. She queued up a playlist of our songs, and somewhere between the airport and our apartment, in a moment charged with reunion's raw energy, we reconnected in a way we hadn't in years. It was spontaneous, a bit reckless, but it felt like reclaiming a part of us lost in time. Walking into our apartment, I caught her glancing at her phone more often than I remembered. There was a slight shift, a sort of secrecy in the way she'd angled the screen away from me. But hey, after years of long distance, trust was our foundation. I shrugged it off, attributing it to her needing to catch up on messages from friends or perhaps jet-lagged, making her crave some personal space. The next day, we ventured out for brunch at our favorite spot, the one where we had our first date. It felt normal, comfortable, and right. We talked, laughed, and shared glances that said, "I've missed this." The physical connection was undeniable, a reminder of the chemistry that had first drawn us together. It felt like we were picking up right where we left off, no distance or time could dampen what we had. Yet, as days passed, her phone became a constant companion during our moments together. Movie nights ended with her on one end of the couch, me on the other, and her attention firmly locked on her screen. I noticed, sure, but never brought it up. Why stir trouble when everything else felt so right? December 22nd rolled around too quickly, and she was packing up to spend Christmas with her family abroad. She promised we'd stay in touch, FaceTime every day, and share in the holiday spirit, despite the miles. It sounded perfect, but the reality was different. Getting her on a call became a Herculean task, each attempt met with excuses about family outings or bad Wi-Fi. Concern crept in, whispering doubts I was quick to silence. We did manage to connect on Christmas Day, though, and for a while, it was like nothing had changed. We laughed, reminisced, and made plans for the future. Plans filled with hope and shared dreams. But as the call ended, and I was left in the silence of my apartment, the joy of the moment faded, leaving me with an unease I couldn't quite shake off. Was I just being paranoid, or was the distance between us more than just physical now? The trust that had once been unshakable now seemed to have developed hairline cracks, invisible but ever present. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder if the distance had changed us more than I'd realized, or if, maybe, I was just afraid of what the future held for us. The air was frosty when she returned on December 27th, but the chill inside wasn't from the weather. It was her, distant like she'd brought back a piece of the foreign winter in her heart. She was glued to her phone, her fingers swiping with purpose, her eyes rarely meeting mine. Even as I tried to close the gap between us on the couch, she'd subtly shift away, her phone always in hand. It was like she was physically there, but miles away in spirit. Then came December 30th, a day that started like any other but ended with my world turned upside down. "We need to talk," she said, the weight of those words hanging heavy between us. She talked about feeling neglected, about mistrust that seemed to come out of nowhere. I was blindsided, scrambling to find words, to understand where all this was coming from. "I just think it's best if we end things," she concluded, her voice steady, her decision seemingly final. Desperation kicked in. "We can work through this," I pleaded, my mind racing to offer solutions, changes, anything. "I can be better, more attentive, whatever you need." But her resolve was a fortress, my words, mere whispers against its walls. She had made up her mind, leaving me grappling with a reality I wasn't ready to accept. However, a sliver of hope emerged when we decided to give it another go on our city break planned for January 2nd. It was like a ceasefire, a brief respite from the turmoil. Those days were a mix of the familiar and the tentative, moments of intimacy intertwining with bursts of laughter. It felt like navigating a minefield blindfolded, exhilarating yet terrifying, not knowing if the next step would bring us closer or set everything ablaze again. By January 6th, as I drove her to the airport, the goodbye was filled with promises of effort and making it work. Yet, the unease lingered, a silent passenger on the ride back home. Her words said one thing, but the hesitation in her voice, the fleeting looks, told a different story. It was like watching a replay of our happiest moments, only this time, the colors were muted, the sounds a little off. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts a jumbled mess. The silence of the apartment was a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I replayed our conversations, searching for signs, for reasons why things felt so off. Was it me? Was it her? Was it the distance that had wedged itself between us, not just physically but emotionally? In that solitude, the realization hit hard. We were two people holding on to the ghost of what we used to be, scared to let go, yet hurting from holding on too tight. The promise to make it work was like a band-aid on a wound that needed stitches, temporary relief doomed to give way. I sank into the couch, her absence more palpable than ever. The room was filled with memories, with echoes of laughter and whispers of love, now overshadowed by the weight of unsaid words and unresolved feelings. The journey ahead was uncertain, a path shrouded in fog, with the only guarantee being that it wouldn't be easy. But as the night crept in, one thing was clear. This was a chapter of our lives closing, with the next page still unwritten, and the pen heavy in my hands. It was January 9th when my world got flipped, yet again. "I think I've settled for less," she said, her words slicing through the air like a cold breeze. "I need space," she added, as if the miles and oceans between us during her studies weren't space enough. There I was, tossed into the limbo of hopeful waiting, clinging to the thin thread of maybe, just maybe, things could turn around. Days turned into nights filled with restlessness. My mind, a relentless detective, couldn't shake off the gnawing suspicion. So, I turned to technology for answers. Find My iPhone became my ally. And there it was, her location pinging from the same friend's house over and over. Space? More like specific coordinates to where our relationship's trust was being questioned. I confronted her, my voice laced with a mix of hope and dread. "So, this friend's place. You're there a lot, huh?" Her response was quick, too rehearsed. "Yeah, just hanging out, you know? It's nothing." But the seed of doubt was planted, watered by her evasion and nurtured by her half-hearted reassurances. The pressure built in a volcano on the brink. I needed clarity, a solid ground to stand on. "We can't keep doing this dance," I told her. "You need to decide what you want." It was a plea, a last-ditch effort to salvage the love I thought we had. But her resolve was ironclad, her words final. "I just need to be alone," she said, and with that, she cut me off from Find My iPhone, severing the last thread of our digital connection. Then, out of the blue, she shared her Uber location with me. The destination? The same house. A cruel twist of fate or a slip-up, it didn't matter. It was a breadcrumb trail leading to the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to find. I confronted her again, my frustration boiling over. "You keep ending up at this place. You're telling me there's nothing going on?" Her denial came as swiftly as before, a well-rehearsed script, devoid of guilt. "I've told you, it's not like that," she insisted, but the conviction was missing, her words hollow. The realization hit me like a freight train. The person I loved, trusted, and waited for was now a stranger, her actions and words weaving a web of deceit I could no longer ignore. The fabric of our relationship, once woven with threads of love and trust, was now frayed, torn by lies and secrets. As I sat alone, the silence of the room amplifying the chaos in my mind, I understood that this was more than just about her needing space or finding herself. It was about respect, honesty, and the painful truth that sometimes love isn't enough to bridge the gap between two hearts drifting apart. The chapter of us, once vibrant and full of promise, was closing, leaving behind a trail of what-ifs and memories fading into the backdrop of a love story that lost its way. The moment we blocked each other on all social media, it felt like plunging into an ice-cold ocean, the shock of it leaving me gasping for air. There I was, floating in a vortex of anxiety, doubt, and the kind of betrayal that eats at you from the inside out. The silence from her end was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding in my mind. It was in one of those long, sleepless nights that I stumbled upon something that turned my world upside down. Spotify, of all things, became the unexpected witness to her infidelity. Their playlists, a digital tapestry of songs, each one a thread in the story of her betrayal. It was like discovering a secret language, one that spelled out my worst fears in melodies and lyrics. Driven by a cocktail of hurt and desperation, I dialed her number, my heart pounding against my chest. The phone rang, each tone a step deeper into the abyss. Then, a click. Hello? Her voice, once my comfort, now a sharp reminder of our fractured reality. Is it true? I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause, heavy and loaded, before she hung up, a brief but definitive confirmation of my suspicions. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from her, apologizing for being rude, as if manners were the crux of our problems. I couldn't hold back. Tell me the truth, I texted back, my fingers trembling over the screen. And she did. There's someone else, she admitted, her words like a final nail in the coffin of our relationship. She spoke of love for this new man, citing the attention he lavished on her, attention I supposedly failed to provide. I sat there, phone in hand, a numbness spreading through me. The depth of her deceit was breathtaking. All those times she'd asked for presents, for tokens of my affection, she'd been nurturing another relationship behind my back. It wasn't just the infidelity, it was the calculated manipulation of my feelings, keeping me as a safety net while she explored new possibilities. The realization was a crushing blow. I'd been a pawn in her game, my love and commitment exploited for her selfish needs. The weight of this truth was suffocating, pressing down on me until I felt I could no longer breathe. I was left to grapple with the shattered pieces of what I thought was a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. As I reflected on her actions, the scale of her betrayal unfolded before me. It wasn't an impulsive mistake or a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a series of calculated decisions made at the expense of my trust and emotional well-being. The person I had loved and trusted for years had become a stranger, her actions alien and cruel. In the aftermath, I found myself spiraling, each day a battle against the tide of emotions threatening to pull me under. The pain of her betrayal, the humiliation of being deceived, and the realization of my own naivety converged into a storm of despair. But amidst the wreckage, a painful clarity began to emerge. I understood that this wasn't just about her infidelity or the end of our relationship, it was a harsh lesson in self-respect and the importance of recognizing one's worth. The road to recovery would be long and fraught with challenges, but it was a journey I had to undertake, not for her, but for myself. As I faced the daunting task of rebuilding my life, I knew that the scars of her deceit would always be a part of me. Yet, in that moment of profound loss, I also found a glimmer of hope. Hope that, with time, I could learn to trust again, to love again, and most importantly, to forgive, not for her sake, but for my own. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, life throws you a curveball that knocks you off your feet. That was me, the guy who thought he had the perfect relationship, until the day I stumbled upon the undeniable proof of her betrayal. It was like a gut punch, the kind that leaves you gasping for air, questioning every moment, every memory. The discovery was just the beginning, the catalyst for a descent I hadn't seen coming. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, swinging wildly between wanting to fix what we had and burning everything to the ground in search of revenge. It was a toxic mix, one that began to eat away at the fabric of my daily life. Work became an afterthought, a place I showed up to but wasn't really present. Deadlines slipped by unnoticed, and projects that once ignited my passion felt like burdens. I was unraveling, thread by thread, and the worst part? I didn't even care. My family and friends, they noticed. How could they not? I was a shell of the man I used to be, hollowed out by anger and pain. They reached out, hands extended with words of comfort and offers of escape. But I pushed them away, too consumed by my own sense of betrayal to accept their help. I've got this, I'd say, a lie I told myself more than anyone else. As the days turned into weeks, I became a detective in my own twisted drama, piecing together the timeline of her infidelity. Social media, once a place of shared photos and happy memories, became my hunting ground. Every like, every comment, a potential clue. Mutual friends, once sources of joy, were now interrogated, their words sifted for hints of deceit. My obsession knew no bounds. I confronted him, the other man, in a showdown that was more about my shattered ego than seeking any real answers. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and for a moment, I teetered on the edge of violence, driven by a desire to reclaim some semblance of control. But this path, this need for vengeance, it led me down dark alleys I never intended to explore. Legal warnings soon followed, a stark reminder that my quest for justice was veering into dangerous territory. Privacy violations, they said, harassment claims, words that felt like handcuffs, restraining my every move. In a desperate bid for vindication, I turned to social media, airing our dirty laundry for the world to see. It was a mistake, a miscalculation driven by pain. Instead of rallying allies, I found myself more isolated, caught in the crossfire of divided loyalties. Friends I'd known for years chose sides, leaving me adrift in a sea of judgment and whispered conversations. Work, my once secure haven, became a battleground. My performance, hampered by sleepless nights and days spent in the grip of obsession, plummeted. Warnings turned into stern conversations, and eventually, the demotion came. It was a blow, not just to my career but to my identity, a confirmation of the failure I felt etched into every aspect of my life. I was lost, adrift in a storm of my own making, unable to see the shore. The man I once was, confident, driven, happy, seemed like a stranger, a distant memory overshadowed by the wreckage of the present. The pursuit of truth, of some semblance of justice, had cost me more than I ever imagined, leaving me to wonder if any of it was worth the price. In the thick of a storm you've whipped up yourself, there's a desperate kind of clarity that comes with knowing you've got nothing left to lose. That was me, gearing up for one last stand, a final showdown that I hoped would bring me some semblance of closure. I was gunning for remorse, maybe a sliver of guilt, or at the very least, an explanation that made sense of the chaos she'd left in her wake. We met in the very cafe where our story began, the irony of the setting not lost on me. There she was, the same, yet unrecognizably different, her indifference a stark contrast to the turmoil churning inside me. As I laid bare my pain, seeking some acknowledgement of the wreckage, her responses were cold, calculated. The finality in her voice, the way she spoke of her new life without a hint of regret, it was a clear message. I was a chapter firmly closed. The aftermath was brutal. My attempts at reaching out, at salvaging what dignity I had left, were met with legal threats, her words slicing through any hope of reconciliation. It was a wake-up call, a bitter realization that the battleground I was on was one where I stood utterly alone. Then came the wedding of a mutual friend, an event that should have been a celebration but instead felt like walking into the lion's den. There they were, the perfect couple, while whispers of my downfall circulated like fine wine. My presence was a reminder of a scandal, my every move watched, analyzed, and judged. It was in that moment, surrounded by faces I once considered friends, that I truly understood the depth of my isolation. In the months that followed, I tried to move on, to find solace in new beginnings. But each attempt was a glaring reminder of the past, my unresolved feelings acting as a barrier I couldn't breach. The shadow of public outbursts and whispered accusations followed me, a stigma I couldn't shake. The final nail in the coffin was a letter from her, an impersonal epitaph to what we once had. Her words were sharp, a clinical dissection of our relationship, each sentence reinforcing her decision as one made in pursuit of her happiness. It was a cold, calculated goodbye, one that left no room for doubt or hope. I was left reeling, a ship adrift in a sea of my own making. The realization that I had lost not just the woman I loved, but everything that defined me was crushing. My dignity, my friends, even my sense of purpose, all casualties of a war I'd waged on myself. Professionally, I was a ghost, my once promising career a casualty of my inability to separate personal turmoil from my work. The day I lost my job was just another chapter in the tragic saga I'd authored, a tangible reminder of how far I'd fallen. Sitting amidst the ruins of what my life had become, I couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had led me here. It was a stark landscape, one where every choice, every action had contributed to my undoing. The pursuit of closure, of understanding, had cost me everything, leaving me to navigate the wreckage of a life I scarcely recognize. In the aftermath of heartbreak and betrayal, I found myself adrift in a sea of confusion and sorrow. The life I knew, the love I cherished, was gone, leaving behind a void that seemed impossible to fill. It was during these darkest hours that I stumbled upon an online forum, a haven for souls shattered by deceit. Reading through the stories of others, I felt a kinship in our shared pain, a flicker of hope in the solidarity of our experiences. Compelled by this newfound community, I took the brave step of seeking therapy. Sitting in that small, dimly lit room, I poured out my heart to a stranger. It was a daunting task, unraveling the layers of trust, betrayal, and the raw wounds of my public breakdown. Yet, with each session, I felt a weightlifting, a clarity emerging from the fog of my despair. It was during this period of self-reflection and healing that fate threw a curveball my way, a chance encounter with a woman who sparked something in me I thought was lost forever. Her laughter, her empathy, it offered a glimpse of what could be. But the specter of my past loomed large, the scars of betrayal too fresh, sabotaging what little hope we might have had for something more. The realization that I needed a fresh start was sudden but undeniable. I decided to move to a new city, to leave behind the ghosts of my past relationship and the failures that haunted me. Packing up my life was a bittersweet journey through memory lane, each photo, each memento a reminder of better times, tinged with regret and what-ifs. Arriving in my new city, I was met with the harsh reality that escaping my past was not as simple as changing my address. Despite the physical distance, the reach of social media and the whispers of mutual connections ensured that my reputation had followed me. The shadow of my former life cast a long, dark silhouette over my attempts to start anew. The offer of a new job provided a much-needed distraction, a chance to rebuild my professional life and, perhaps, my sense of self. Yet, connecting with my new colleagues proved challenging. The fear of repeating past mistakes, of opening up only to be hurt again, kept me at arm's length, trapped in a self-imposed exile. In search of an outlet, a way to process my journey and perhaps help others navigating their own paths through heartbreak, I started a blog. Writing anonymously, I shared my story, my mistakes, my lessons learned. The act of putting words to my pain, to my growth, became a therapeutic endeavor, a way to make sense of the chaos that had once threatened to consume me. Now, as I stand looking out over the skyline of my new city, I'm struck by the duality of my circumstances. Yes, I've managed to put physical distance between myself and the reminders of my past, but the emotional scars remain, a testament to the cost of love and betrayal. It's a sobering realization, one that comes with its own form of peace. For in acknowledging the scars, in accepting the pain and the lessons it has taught me, I find myself ready to face whatever comes next, armed with a deeper understanding of myself and a cautious hope for the future. The journey has been long, fraught with setbacks and moments of despair, but also marked by growth and unexpected moments of grace. As the sun sets on this chapter of my life, I'm reminded that while the past may shape us, it does not define us. The true measure of our strength lies in our ability to rise from the ashes of our darkest days, to forge ahead with resilience, and to open our hearts once more, despite knowing the risks. This is the true cost of love and betrayal, but also the undeniable value of hope. And you think cheaters always get away with it? Think again. I had this buddy, Mark, solid guy. Thought his wife was the same. Turns out, secrets ain't just for keeping. They're like time bombs waiting to blow your whole life sky high. You see, I fell for Mark's wife, Sarah. Yeah, I know, I'm the worst. One stolen kiss, and it was a race to see how far we could fall. The lies got bigger, the sneaking around got riskier. We were playing with fire, man, and let me tell you, we got burned. This ain't your average heartbreak story. This is about how one stupid decision wrecked families, shattered friendships, and turned my entire world into a damn war zone. You ready for this? It gets messy. The whole "your wife fancies you" thing was a punch in the gut. I mean, come on, Mark, your best mate, is this some kind of weird test? I tossed and turned that night, her face, Sarah's face, flashing through my mind. The next morning, I felt like I'd been run over. Should I tell my wife? Nah, that'd open a whole other can of worms. Best to just forget the whole damn thing. A couple of days pass, and I'm starting to think I imagined the whole conversation. But then there's a Facebook message waiting for me. It's her, Sarah. My stomach flips. Turns out, Mark wasn't messing around. Her messages are playful, flirty, bold. It's like she's the cat and I'm some poor mouse she's got cornered. I try to resist, but there's no denying it, the spark is lit. Soon, a couple of messages turns into late-night chats, the kind I haven't had since I was a lovesick teenager. I know this is dangerous territory, but the thrill of the forbidden, it's intoxicating. One Tuesday, I end up working late. Instead, I find myself at Mark and Sarah's place. He's out of town for the night. It's meant to be just a quick visit, the excuse about catching up with both of them. But as Sarah talks, her eyes glinting with that knowing spark, all my willpower crumbles. Before I know it, we're in a desperate clinch, the world outside shrinking away. That's when it starts. The sneaking around, the stolen moments, the constant lies. Every time I look at Mark, the guilt eats away at me. Am I really low enough to betray my oldest friend this way? But Sarah, she's somehow wormed her way into my head. The rush of it all masks the sinking feeling that this is a runaway train, and I'm tied to the tracks. I never realized grocery shopping could be so damn exhilarating. There I was, standing in the cereal aisle beside Sarah, our carts almost touching. Suddenly, finding the right kind of granola felt like a life or death situation. We're pretending this is some random run-in, but there's zero chance anyone would buy that. After the grocery store, there's the coffee shop detour. We sit at a corner table, knees brushing, the hum of the cafe fading into the background as she throws me a mischievous grin. The air between us is charged, and I'm desperately trying to play it cool while my insides are on fire. With her leaning in, all I can think about is Mark's trusting face and how easily I'm destroying it with every innocent-looking latte. The lies come easier than I ever thought they would. Oh, meeting ran late, traffic was hell, yeah, had to pull an extra shift. My wife doesn't doubt me, but I see a flicker of concern in her eyes. She senses something's off, but she can't pinpoint the exact reason. It's only a matter of time before suspicion cracks through. My phone has basically become a ticking time bomb. I've switched Sarah's name to something boring, set the ringtone to silent, and I jump at the slightest vibration. Each text from her requires a calculated response, not too eager, not too dismissive. It's all a carefully crafted illusion, and I'm the architect of my own deception. When Mark calls, my heart sinks. His voice is cheerful, oblivious to that I'm sweating bullets. He talks about weekend plans, a double date, and I have to force myself to sound enthusiastic. The irony is suffocating. Later, Sarah texts something fiery, and all I can picture is Mark laughing, completely clueless to the betrayal I'm orchestrating behind his back. Maybe I'm a terrible person, because despite the guilt, the thrill of the chase still hasn't worn off. It's a sick game, and I'm already in way too deep. Sarah's apartment smells like jasmine and some other scent I can't place. Sin, maybe. That's the thing about this whole twisted mess, it's poisoned every part of me. I can't think straight, sleep straight. I'm a malfunctioning robot pretending to be a normal husband and dad. Every time I sneak out to see her, it's like playing Russian roulette. Checking over my shoulder in parking lots, glancing at my reflection in windows, praying I don't see someone I know. Paranoia's got its claws in me, whispering that at any second, the bottom's going to drop out. But then I'm with her, and the fear recedes. Her touch sends shockwaves through me, her laughter makes my pulse race. We're building our own little world, one stolen hour at a time. Except, I know it's a flimsy house of cards. It's perched on lies, and the slightest breeze could tear it all apart. My old phone sits on a dusty shelf. That's my real-life phone calls from my kids, messages from work. My secret phone buzzes, and my heart leaps. It's Sarah, and every text is another nail in the coffin of my sanity. We get sloppy, lingering too long outside her building, letting a kiss stretch out in the driveway. Each reckless move ups the ante. Screw Mark, Sarah hisses, her fingers tangled in my hair. This is real, he doesn't deserve you, and for a dangerous second, I almost believe her. The night everything changes starts just like the others. I lie to my wife, some half-baked excuse about a project, and then I'm racing to Sarah. But there's a strange twist in my gut of feeling I can't shake. It's not guilt, not fear, it's a sense of inevitability, like the trap has finally been sprung, and I'm the oblivious rat walking straight into it. My hands won't stop shaking. I'm parked outside this dingy motel, Sarah asleep beside me, and all I can think about is blowing up our sorry little escape. I should march straight home, tell my wife everything, maybe even show her the string of filthy texts. Beg for forgiveness, or at least punishment. Anything would be better than this limbo. But as the sun starts to rise, painting the motel room in a sickly pink, Sarah stirs. Her eyes lock with mine, heavy with sleep and a familiar hunger. Just like that, the resolve slips away, replaced with a sickening wave of desire and self-loathing. I'm hooked. Addicted to this twisted game even though I know the only possible ending is devastation. Back home, the lies keep piling up. My wife gives me a concerned look, asks if I'm okay, and I deflect, muttering something about stress. Inside, I'm dying 1,000 deaths. Every time the phone rings, I practically leap out of my skin. What if it's Mark? Has he figured it out? Is some stranger calling my house with a blackmail scheme? It's amazing how quickly your mind can invent fresh new terrors when you're this deep in deceit. At dinner, I force myself to swallow down the bland chicken, all the while imagining the scene with Mark that's inevitable. Him standing there, broken-hearted and furious. He won't hit me, that's not his style. He'll just look at me with absolute contempt, the kind that burns worse than any punch ever could. That night, I dream of courtroom trials, of my children's tear-streaked faces. I wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air. My life is a horror movie, and I'm the architect of my own destruction. Sarah calls. It's code now, business jargon, fake names about clients. But I can barely focus on her words. All I hear is that ticking clock in my head, counting down to the moment the bomb goes off. And the really messed up part? I'm not even sure I want to stop it. I don't recognize myself anymore. I see him in the mirror, this pale, haunted stranger, and I hate what he's become. But cutting ties with Sarah? It's not something I can even fathom. She's sunk her claws into me too deep. Every meeting makes her bolder. No more hushed whispers in dim corners. Now it's hand-holding across restaurant tables, the brazen way she slides into the passenger seat of my car. We're daring fate to strike us down, and part of me knows it's a matter of when, not if. The day it almost unravels is seared into my brain. We're at the supermarket, a risky move, but she insisted. As we turn down the coffee aisle, a familiar voice jolts me. It's Linda, my neighbor, chatting away. If she turns that corner. I yank Sarah away, my face burning. Let's go, I forgot something. Her eyes narrow in suspicion, but she follows, for now. My heart's pounding like it's going to burst from my chest for the rest of the day. If Linda saw even a glimpse, the rumors will spread like wildfire. Mark's misery ramps up a notch. He drops by my office, unloads about Sarah's moods, their fights. I sit there, the picture of concerned sympathy, while my soul squirms. It's torture I bring on myself. He needs a friend and confides in the man who's tearing his world apart. Sarah's not making this easier. There's a new possessiveness in her, a neediness that makes me uneasy. She calls too much, wants to know my every move. When I push back, a flash of something ugly crosses her face. You think I'd let you walk away? After everything? It was meant to sound playful, but my blood runs cold. Suddenly, it's not just about the affair, it's about her. What depths is she capable of? What will she do if I try to end this? My lies fall apart faster than I can spin them. Excuses for work crumble, my stories get jumbled. My wife's patience is wearing thin, her eyes searching mine for answers. It's like a car crash in slow motion, and there's nothing I can do to swerve out of the way. I just have to wait for the inevitable impact. The text was an accident. A stupid, drunken fumble late one night, meant for Sarah and somehow hitting Mark's number. Words I shouldn't even think, let alone type out, beamed straight to my best friend's phone. It took seconds to realize my mistake, but the damage was done. The next morning, I wake up to a voicemail from Mark. His voice is low, a dangerous calm. We need to talk, come over now, my stomach lurches. If he read that text, my entire world is about to implode. Frantically, I come up with idiotic excuses for my wife, urgent work crisis, surprise call. She sees right through my lies. Her eyes, once filled with concern, are now hard with suspicion. On the drive over to Mark's, all I can think is this might be the last time I see them, my family, before everything falls apart. Sarah's not answering her phone. Useless. I need to control the damage, but my mind is a jumbled mess. Mark greets me at the door, no handshake, no forced smile. Just that grim set to his jaw. He ushers me into the living room, the same room where we've had countless beers, watched countless games. It feels foreign now. Cut the crap, he spits. What the hell's going on with you and Sarah? He holds up his phone, screen flashing that damning text. My lies crumple like wet paper. All I can manage is pathetic apologies, weak denials. He doesn't buy it. Fury explodes in his eyes, the kind of rage that makes him unrecognizable. He's ready to throw me out, maybe beat me down. Instead, he drops a chilling line. Get out. Think about how you're going to tell your wife. The drive home is a blur. I make it inside somehow, legs leaden. I can't look my wife in the eye. Guilt and shame choke me. The coward's way out is to run, disappear. But some shred of decency keeps me rooted in place. The next few days are a living hell. Sarah's furious, hissing accusations, alternating with desperate pleas for me not to leave her. My phone lighting up with unknown numbers and hang-ups makes me jumpy. Has Mark told everyone? Are strangers about to expose me? Then it comes. The email to Mark's work inbox. A single blurry photo me and Sarah locked in a kiss. No sender name, no message, just the damning proof of my betrayal. All my careful lies, my pathetic attempts at control, are useless now. The bomb has gone off, and the fallout is going to be devastating. The silence in the aftermath of Mark's fury is worse than any shouting. He doesn't even look at me, just moves like a machine packing Sarah's stuff. Her tears and pathetic attempts to defend herself fall on deaf ears. Mark's a man transformed, the good-hearted buddy replaced by this cold, merciless stranger. They're gone with a slam of the door. It echoes through my house, my soul. Mark's last words ring in my ears, the most dangerous kind. He's right, I was the snake in the grass, the one nobody saw coming. Facing my wife is the next circle of hell. How do you even start that conversation? Every time I open my mouth, pathetic excuses die on my lips. She sees through me. Finally, I choke the truth out. It spills forth, ugly and vile. The sneaking around, the lies, the photo that blew it all apart. She doesn't explode, doesn't throw things. Instead, a chilling calm settles over her. Her voice is low, words carefully chosen. You disgust me, get out of my sight. It's not a request, it's an order. And for the first time in this whole mess, I obey without question. The kids are confused, they saw the yelling with Mark, sense something horrible is happening. I want to comfort them, explain, but there is no explanation, no fixing this. I pack a pathetic bag and leave, the coward fleeing his own wreckage. Motel rooms become my new home. The news is alight with the gossip. Apparently, Mark made no secret of it. I'm the town's new villain, Sarah the scheming seductress. My face might as well be plastered on a most wanted poster. Work calls, relentless at first, turn to an ominous silence. No severance, no polite email. Just termination, the professional word for a death sentence. Sarah tries to reach out, a mix of fury and some warped version of needing me. But I ignore her. There's nothing to salvage from what we had. I'm drowning, and she's just another weight pulling me down. Sleep offers no escape, nightmares of Mark's face twisted with hatred, my wife's tear-streaked face, my kids backing away from me in fear, it's torture my guilty mind orchestrates. I bolt awake, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. Some nights, the only way to numb the pain is to drink myself into a stupor. It doesn't bring oblivion, just makes it all worse. The world keeps spinning, heedless of my spectacular fall from grace. I'm the ghost now, haunting dingy motels, peering from behind drawn curtains at a world that wants nothing to do with me. Shame is a relentless stalker, my constant shadow. My parents find out, it's my sister who calls, voice tight with barely concealed contempt. My dad is a man of few words, but I hear the disappointment crushing down on him through the phone line. My mom, she just weeps. It's a sound that'll haunt me forever. Word gets back to me about my family. My kids refuse to visit, barely speak to me on the phone. My wife's hired a fire-breathing lawyer, divorce proceedings are a freight train barreling towards me. It's all deserved, nothing softens the blow, no excuses I can tell myself anymore. Then, the physical symptoms start. Chest pains in the middle of the night send me to a grimy ER, convinced I'm having a heart attack. Turns out it's panic attacks, my body short-circuiting under the weight of guilt. The doctor scribbles a prescription, Xanax, my new crutch, to numb the constant anxiety eating me alive. Sarah's not faring any better. Word is, she's crashing at a friend's place, Mark's kicked her to the curb too. She calls sometimes, ranting, threatening, sometimes just sobbing. I want to cut her off entirely, but a twisted, pathetic part of me still clings to some warped sense of connection. We're the only ones who understand this particular kind of hell. One rainy afternoon, I see Mark. It's in the grocery store, of all places. He's gaunt, eyes shadowed, but the hatred blazing in them is as bright as ever. I try to mumble an apology, but he just turns away, disgust written on his back. We used to buy beer in this aisle, joke about football, now we're just strangers who despise each other to the very core. Back at the motel, a letter slides under the door. No stamp, just my name scrawled on it. It's from my wife. One page, words like knives. She's not talking about reconciliation, it's about obliteration. My life as I knew it doesn't just have cracks, it's been atomized. Waking up is the worst part. It's those first few seconds when reality hasn't sucker punched me yet, and then my brain catches up. The cheap motel mattress, the stale smell of booze and desperation, the crushing weight of knowing I've thrown away everything that mattered. Days bleed into each other. I drink to numb the pain, and then drink to numb the hangover. It's a vicious cycle that's dragging me under. I barely even leave the room, the outside world a terrifying stage full of accusing glares and whisper judgments. One bleary night, I decide to walk outside. Just a few blocks, maybe get some pathetic fast food to soak up the booze. It's on that grimy street corner that I see Sarah. She's thinner, a ghost of the woman who once lured me in. We stare at each other, united by our shared ruin. For a moment, the anger flares again, the urge to blame her. But looking at her, I just feel a bone-deep weariness. What's the point in more recriminations? We both played our part in this mess, both architects of our own downfall. We talk, a strained conversation on a dirty sidewalk, and then part ways without a backward glance. That night, I hit my absolute low. The Xanax and whiskey mix into a dangerous cocktail, and I wake up in a hospital bed. Overdose. Not some noble attempt at escape, just carelessness born from despair. The look in the overworked nurse's eyes mixes pity with a hint of disgust. It's the nudge I desperately need. A therapist is recommended. Some low-cost clinic, more out of pity than anything else. I hated it at first. Poking around in the wreckage of my past, the screwed-up reasons why I craved the rush of the affair. It's slow, agonizing work. There are no easy answers, no instant forgiveness. Word trickles back that Mark's found someone new. Surprisingly, it doesn't stir jealousy, just a dull ache in my chest. He deserves happiness. Me? Well, that's a much harder question. A letter arrives, Mark's handwriting again. In it, he details all the practical things. Selling the house, the financial devastation I've caused him. His anger is cold, clinical, and it cuts deeper than any shouting ever could. So, here I am. Broken, alone, trying to piece together some kind of existence out of the ashes of my old life. Am I on the path to redemption? Hell if I know. Some days, just getting out of bed feels like a victory. Other days, the darkness still calls, and I'm not sure I have the strength to fight it off forever. Turns out, rock bottom has a basement level one hadn't even considered. The court finalizes my divorce. The words on the official papers are dry, devoid of emotion, yet they cut like shards of glass. A retrievable breakdown of the marriage. I become a walking, talking cliché, a cautionary tale. I lose track of how long I've been living in that crappy motel. Weeks, months, it all blurs together. One morning, driven by desperation or maybe some flicker of self-preservation, I force myself out. Sunlight hurts my eyes, and the simple act of walking to the bus stop feels like climbing Everest. A faded poster catches my eye. Soup kitchen, volunteers needed. It's a pathetically small thing to do, but I need something beyond wallowing in guilt and cheap booze. Turns out, handing out warm meals to homeless folks is humbling in a way I never expected. Their struggles dwarf my own, yet some of them smile, genuinely smile, at me. It's like a tiny crack in the wall of misery I've built around myself. Therapy is still a slog. Talking about myself makes my skin crawl, but some days I make breakthroughs. Turns out, my dad was distant when I was a kid, and my mom. Well, she put me on a pedestal that no person could ever live up to. It's not an excuse, but it's a start. Word gets back to me that my kids miss me. At least, that's what my sister tells me with a wary look. It's the first shred of hope I've felt in ages. I write letters, long, handwritten apologies that I don't even expect them to read, at least not at first. But it's a start. My parents tentatively offer a lifeline. I can move back home for a while, get a job, get back on my feet. Pride makes me hesitate, but desperation wins. Sleeping on their fold-out couch is a hell of a lot better than those motel mattresses. Turns out, Mark and Sarah are still a toxic disaster. She's apparently moved back in with him, their fight's the talk of the town. People look at me with a strange mix of pity and revulsion as the details filter through the grapevine. I deserve every bit of it. Then, there's Emily. We meet at the soup kitchen, both painfully aware we don't belong on this side of the serving table. She's got haunted eyes, the kind that have seen too much. Turns out, her husband ran off with her best friend. We share a dark understanding, an unspoken bond in the pain we've both endured and inflicted. She doesn't judge me, and in return, I just listen. The path to fixing my life seems longer than I ever imagined. Some days I take baby steps forward, others I stumble back. But at least now, I'm walking. I'll never be who I once was. Maybe redemption is too much to hope for. But for the first time in forever, the future doesn't seem like a gaping, empty void. It's just unknown. And for now, it was getting dark outside. An autumn, cold evening was approaching. "Mia, where were you rushing off to again?" asked Chad, noticing his wife eating on the go and constantly glancing at her watch. "My friend Julia asked me to stop by. Remember, I told you we lived together in the orphanage, asked for help with some housework. After a difficult surgery I couldn't refuse." Mia replied, looking at her husband imploringly. "Mia, are you her servant?" "I don't understand you," Chad retorted. "Darling, I want to be gone long." "I'll be back soon," Mia said, before running out of the house a few minutes later. Chad was the son of a general. His parents were against their son marrying Mia, an orphan from the orphanage. They had long predicted a career in diplomacy for Chad, and dreamed of him marrying Milena, the daughter of a well-known businessman in town. Before meeting Mia, Chad was not averse to marrying Milena for business, as his father put it. However, Chad wanted to pursue a career in business, not diplomacy. Mr. Rendon, Milena's father, persuaded him to do so. Chad received a brilliant education abroad, had a sharp mind and an excellent memory. Mr. Rendon took it upon himself to hone the knowledge of his future son-in-law in practice, teaching him the basics and pitfalls of business. The man not only gave instructions, but also invested his own money in a new joint project with Chad, and so the business began to grow. Shopping centers opened one after another, and profits grew, settling in the pockets of the businessman. "Well, son-in-law, soon we'll be related not only financially, but also by blood," Mr. Rendon liked to say, smiling contentedly. He considered Chad the perfect husband for his spoiled daughter Milena, but there was no love between the young couple. "Well, it's okay, daughter. Only losers came up with the fairy tale of love and are fooling themselves with it. Chad is a great match for you, and as for love, you're both young, beautiful, and passionate. What can't be cured must be endured." However, Mr. Rendon's predictions were not meant to come true. Everything was turned upside down by Chad's chance encounter with a provincial girl named Mia at the cinema. She worked at a factory and rented a small room in a communal apartment. Love ignited in Chad's heart suddenly, even at the first meeting. What made Mia so attractive to him? Perhaps it was her kindness, sincerity, meekness, modesty and tenderness, all the things that were completely absent in Milena. They had only been seeing each other for a week, but Chad, falling in love like a boy, realized that he couldn't live without Mia. The feeling was mutual. Mia was sure that she had met the man of her dreams, the one she constantly read about in romance novels. And now it had happened in real life. After several meetings, Chad proposed to Mia without telling his parents. When his parents found out what had happened, they were emotionally shocked. "Are you insane?" they screamed at him. "You are going to exchange Milena for this orphan without family. How will we face Mr. Rendon? He invested so much in you. Marrying this pauper is a disaster for everything, both business and normal life." But despite his parents' desperate objections, Chad did not cancel his decision to marry Mia. His love for her was 1,000 times stronger than his parents' attacks. Mr. Rendon reassured Chad's parents, saying, "Come on, don't be silly. He'll get married and then get divorced, I bet he dreamed of a beautiful future for his daughter and would do everything to reunite Chad and Milena again. No guests attended Mia and Chad's wedding. Chad's parents barely crossed the threshold of the registry office and did not stay there for more than 10 minutes. But the young couple was happy together, despite everything. Chad rented a spacious apartment in a new building, and life flowed calmly and joyfully, like a family. Chad and Mia seemed to dissolve into each other and were already thinking about having a child. The peaceful idyll of Mia was suddenly interrupted by a phone call. Mia, hello. You don't recognize me. I am Scott, your brother. I returned from prison 3 days ago. Mia's heart sank. She knew how much Chad's relatives hated her, and she was afraid to reveal the whole truth about her family, saying only that she lived in an orphanage. Mia hid that her mother was in prison for causing serious bodily harm to her stepfather, and that she died there. Mia also did not reveal that her brother was also in prison for robbery. The girl was sure that if Chad's relatives knew about this, they would never have allowed her to marry Chad and be happy. And now this call from the past. Mia, why are you silent? Maybe you're not happy. I heard you married a millionaire. You probably have a lot of money. Can't you share with your own brother? I need a little bit. I also need a corner to live for a short time. I'll look around and return the money right away. Mia did not dare to refuse her brother and quietly said, I'll think about how to help you. She and Chad got married. She left her job at the factory at her husband's request. Instead of a salary, Mia now received money from her husband on a personal card. She had been supporting her wayward brother Scott with this money for over a month. She even rented a small apartment in an old building for him. What's wrong, Mia? Can't you buy new dresses for yourself? Chad asked her, noticing that his wife was not updating her wardrobe at all. Why spend so much right away? I have a lot of normal clothes. Mia evasively replied. And Chad smiled. You're right, Mia. You're beautiful in any clothes. The only thing that worried Chad was his wife's frequent departures from home, especially in the last month, and today she had reason to leave the house again because her friend Julia asked for help. Chad knew Mia to be a kind and compassionate person who cared about the troubles of others, but he never expected her to go to such lengths. In fact, once again, Mia had gone to great lengths to help her brother by buying him groceries. She knew that if she gave him money, he would spend it on alcohol. Mia felt heavy-hearted. She knew her husband did not approve of her absences, and she was risking losing him. She tried to push away the negative thoughts, but they kept returning with renewed strength. Finally, Mia promised herself that she would tell her husband about her strange trips the next day. Little did she know, Milena's relatives did not accept Chad's decision to live with Mia. In fact, Mr. Rendon was hatching a cunning plan against Mia. He wanted to frame her for infidelity and thereby cause a divorce between Chad and Mia. Mr. Rendon's driver, Paul, accidentally saw Mia on the street with an unknown man. Just in case, he took a couple of photos and reported everything to his boss. Well done, Paul. Excellent. You deserve a bonus from me, rejoiced Mr. Rendon. I am lucky. I don't even have to come up with anything. The fish itself swam into the nets. Paul, work a little more as a private detective. Watch Mia carefully. Where does she go when she goes out on the street? Maybe she's visiting someone. The driver, of course, was happy to earn extra money and immediately agreed. That fateful evening, Paul followed Mia and recorded the address of the house and apartment. He passed this information on to his boss. Thank you, Mr. Rendon said, even more pleased. The next day, as soon as Chad entered the office, Mr. Rendon told him everything. Take a look at who your wife is spending time with, Mr. Rendon sneered. I think it's just a coincidence, nothing more, Chad replied calmly. Don't think about it. Just check it out for yourself. I have the address, said Mr. Rendon, handing Chad a piece of paper. Chad refused to believe what was happening. He had no doubts about his wife's fidelity. However, the words of his failed father-in-law became a thorn in his heart. The dull pain in his chest didn't go away for several days. Finally, Chad decided to secretly go to the specified address without telling Mia. On the day Mia decided to tell Chad the truth, he did not come home from work on time. Mia, I'll be delayed for a little while today. I have a lot of work to do. Yes, of course, dear. And I'll go to the store. Do you remember? You complained about my clothes. So I'll take a walk and have a look, Mia said. Again, Chad was completely confused. He did not believe the photos or the words, as they could all be fake. Of course, he had to see everything with his own eyes. After some time, Chad disguised himself as a pizza delivery man and went to the specified address. Who is it? Asked a rough male voice. Pizza delivery. Please open up. I didn't order anything. Please open up. Then you'll make a note of the refusal. The door creaked open. At the doorsteps stood a young man with an unkempt appearance and emanating the smell of alcohol. Chad entered the room, where the man shouted, "What do you think you're doing?" Chad paid him no attention. Instead, he saw the girl standing by the window. She turned around. Mia, how could you? I am sorry, 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 I am sorry. Chad, I'll explain everything. Please stay here, begged the girl. However, Chad just shook his head and rushed down the stairs onto the street. Something unimaginable was happening in his soul. He felt like life was over. The overwhelming emotions almost caused him to have an accident. An hour later, Mia came home and tearfully begged her husband to listen to her. She said that Scott was her own brother, but Chad didn't believe a single word. He decided to end his marriage once and for all, and break up with Mia completely. Although he loved his wife, he was ready to forgive everything except infidelity. Get your suitcase and leave. I'll announce the divorce, Chad said in a cold, unfamiliar voice. Mia quickly threw a few things into the suitcase and slowly walked away. Her body didn't obey, and her legs became like cotton wool. Behind her, she heard the sound of a door slamming shut behind her. The girl sat down on a bench, hugged her head with her hands, and burst into tears. A phone call brought her back to reality. It's Chad. Chad, he's changed his mind. Mia cried out. But unfortunately, it wasn't him. It was her friend, Julia. Hey, Mia, how are you? Julia cheerfully chattered. Mia couldn't take it and cried even harder into the phone. Hey, are you home? I'll be there in 10 minutes. Since childhood, Mia always shared her most intimate emotional experiences with Julia. This time was no exception. Yes, you messed up everything, and your little brother, that scoundrel, got involved. Mia, don't beat yourself up like this. Maybe everything will be okay. Chad must understand that there was no infidelity. If you have nowhere to live now, move in with me. I live alone. The apartment is small, but cozy. Julia kept talking and speaking with her inherent optimism, trying to lift Mia's spirits. But Mia refused to accept what had happened. She didn't lose hope and waited for her beloved. She was sure that Chad would come for her and take her back. Naively, almost childishly, but the girl believed with all her heart in the fairy tale she had invented. Days passed one by one, and with each day, Mia's financial situation worsened. Even small expenses seemed catastrophic as the remnants of the money given to her by Chad melted away. Julia, I need to find a job, Mia said, realizing that waiting for her lost happiness wouldn't fill her stomach. Yes, Julia replied. I agree, my friend. We can't go on like this for much longer. Julia worked as a nurse in a hospital, but her salary was barely enough to pay for their apartment and groceries. Meanwhile, Mia wandered around the city searching for work, receiving rejection after rejection. She was particularly hurt when her former factory turned her away after the HR manager found out that she was no longer the wife of a millionaire. Desperate, Mia sat down on a bench in the park and watched the passers-by with tearful eyes. A gray-haired man of respectable age approached her and asked, "Miss, are you okay?" Mia silently nodded and told the first person she met that she really needed a job. "If you like, come to our community with me. I heard from our concierge that they need a janitor. Do you agree?" Yes, of course. As a janitor, Mia worked tirelessly. Within a few days, she rubbed large blisters, but it didn't bother her. At least she had her own piece of bread and wouldn't be a burden on Julia. But one day, Mia suddenly felt sick, dizzy, and barely made it to the bench. After a few seconds, the malaise went away and Mia returned to work. In the evening, the short attacks repeated. "Dear, something's not right. Are you pregnant, perhaps?" Julia suspected trouble. Mia was horrified at the thought, but soon her fears were confirmed. "Physically, you probably can't work anymore," Julia sighed. Even she, an optimist in life, was upset. Where could they get the money to support the child? However, she tried not to show her gloomy mood to her friend. Mia was thinking about something else entirely. "I need to tell Chad about the baby. He'll find out and be happy, and we'll be together again." Julia seemed to read her mind. "Why should you be the only one carrying this burden? The child has a father, and he should also be involved in its life." "I agree, Julia. I just need to see Chad. Everything will be the same as before." But Chad's mobile phone had not been answered since their breakup. So Mia mustered up the courage and went to his parents' house to find out where Chad could be found. Chad's mother opened the door and immediately attacked Mia, not letting her say a word. "How dare you come here, you ungrateful girl? You deceived my son. What more do you want?" Mia was stunned by the greeting, but found the strength to respond. "I need to talk to Chad and tell him he will be a father, and you will be a grandmother." "What?" The woman turned purple, her voice trembling with indignation. "Tell your lover. You have the child. Then deal with him yourself." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, and she could barely hold them back. "Anyway, if you came here, take this." Chad's mother handed Mia a few sheets of fine paper. "What's this?" Mia asked, confused. "Divorce papers. You won't have to go to court," the woman replied indifferently. "Also, Chad will soon marry a girl who is truly worthy of him. So don't come here anymore." Mia didn't remember how she made it to Julia's house. Everything was a blur. Today, she buried her last chance for a happy life. All that was left was a ridiculous existence. "What are you talking about, Mia? What ridiculous existence?" Julia encouraged her friend. "But money, what will we live on?" Mia worried. "As a single mother, the state will pay you, and I work. Maybe I'll take on 2 jobs. We'll live. We'll raise the baby. No worse than others." Julia supported her friend as best she could. In reality, she didn't believe her own words, and was no less worried than Mia. But it was Julia's support that gave Mia the strength not to fall into depression. Despite her friend's persistent urging to give up work, Mia worked as a janitor until almost the very end of her pregnancy. On New Year's Eve, she gave birth to a daughter, whom the friends decided to name Sarah. Mia and Julia adored the little girl, but it was hard to provide for herself and her child. One day, there was a knock on the door, and Scott was standing on the doorstep. "Hi. Forgive me. I know you think I'm a monster because of me. You lost your husband. But people change, and I've changed for the better. You know, I'm not rich at all, but I'll help as much as I can." Mia couldn't refuse his help, and she had no choice. Thus, 3 years passed. They were difficult, but at the same time, happy for Julia and Mia. They raised Sarah together and tried to deal with life's troubles together. Scott often came to visit them and helped as much as he could. Mia forgave him a long time ago. One day, Scott was walking on a crosswalk and intended to go to Mia and Julia's house. Suddenly, he heard the screech of brakes, and a car stopped just centimeters away from him. "Excuse me. Are you all right?" "Thank God. For the first time in my life, I did not notice a pedestrian," said a frightened man approaching Scott. "Didn't you see me? Did you forget your eyes at home?" Scott grumbled, dissatisfied. He felt like he had seen the face of this driver before, but he couldn't remember where. "Consider it so. I can compensate you for moral damage," said the man staring at the stranger. Suddenly, he realized that it was the same man he saw at the apartment with Mia. "Do you know Mia?" he asked loudly. "Of course I do. I'm her brother. You shouldn't have left Mia. You ruined her life for no reason." "Ruined her life?" "Yes, that's right, I did. And not just for her, but for myself as well." Memories flooded Chad. He had met Mia, fallen in love, against his parents' wishes, broken up because of a ridiculous incident, and regretted it ever since. His marriage to Milena didn't work out. Milena preferred a reckless lifestyle, spending her father's and husband's money. There was not a drop of love in his marriage, and after 6 months, despite her father's pleas, they divorced. Chad was afraid to admit to himself that he couldn't forget Mia. He had driven her away, but love cannot be driven out of the heart. It still belonged to Mia. He didn't have the courage to admit his guilt for all these years. He was guilty of not listening to Mia, and not giving her a chance to explain everything. Guilty of not meeting with her when Mia asked for it. He was guilty of not looking for Mia all these years, although not a day went by without him thinking about her. What is this? Late remorse? Probably. What if it's still possible to get her back? I will definitely do it. Now? When if not now, Chad thought. He felt like he was hit by an electric shock. "Scott, tell me, where does Mia live? Please. I really need to see her." "Where have you been before?" "When Mia and Julia were freezing and hungry in a cold apartment. When Mia, pregnant, spent all day cleaning the yard." "Yeah, you were enjoying life with your millions," said Scott angrily. Chad, taken aback, replied, "I didn't know anything." But Scott couldn't calm down. "You didn't know anything? Oh yeah, that's indeed a good excuse. But maybe you didn't want to know." "Give me the address, please," asked Chad. He was in such a state of emotion that he did not notice Scott's insulting taunts. Calming down a little, Scott scribbled it on paper. "Take it. Perhaps not everything is lost for you yet." Chad ran up the stairs to Julia's apartment. However, the girl responded shortly to his heart-wrenching monologue. "Don't break the drama in 2 acts in front of me. You hurt Mia, hurt her badly. So it's up to her to decide whether you should be in her life or not. By the way, she should be back from work right now." At that moment, the door opened and Mia, emaciated and growing up, entered the apartment. Chad couldn't take his eyes off her. The same bottomless, infinitely familiar eyes, fragile shoulders, tender hands, Mia, his Mia. All the prepared speeches flew out of Chad's head and he could only whisper softly, "Forgive me." He looked into her eyes and understood. No, this is not the end. This is the beginning of something important and new in their